All right. Other thing is the pencil boxes. And pencil box project, every year for the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, we have provided pencil boxes as back-to-school kits for kids that are in need, working through the Type A Orphan Welfare Association. And 2 years ago, we distributed them to Nantou. We did about 180, 190 boxes. Last year, it was Kaohsiung and Tainan. We did about 250 boxes. No, we did about 500 boxes last year. I don't remember right now. Anyway, a lot of things, a lot of places to go on. This was Stefan's, I call it Stefan's baby. This was a great thing that he did, and he loved just taking it and charging out with it and leading it and planning it and then asking for help where he needed. But I can't fill Stefan's shoes. I need your help, and there's already several of you who said you would help. So next Sunday as well, for the pencil boxes, we will have an organizational meeting, and we will start putting together ideas and thinking about how we can make them better. And I mentioned this last week. Stefan already told me about, he had thought about, instead of using the plastic boxes, about maybe getting like a pencil bag or something to put the goods into and different things. Okay, we'll just skip over that. So we'll talk about how to do it, where to do it, how to distribute it, what we want to do, how big we want to make it, whether we want to get other churches involved, because we did get one other church involved last year that helped out some, so we want to do that, and outreach, timing, all that. Next Sunday, again, during the potluck, at some point, we'll have an organizational meeting about that for those that are interested. If you can't be here next Sunday, it's okay. You can still be part of that group. Just let me know for sure. All right. I think that's all my announcements for today. So let's move forward. All right, so as you can see, we're going to talk about having a change of heart today. Is the idea in the thought that comes out of Proverbs 4 and actually out of Deuteronomy 4 as well. But before we get that, I want to show you something. This is one of the boys' T-shirts. You see the T-shirt? I know you can't see the T-shirt very well when I hold it up here, so here you go. Here's the T-shirt, okay? So if you look at the T-shirt, it's, typical T-shirt's got something on front of it. So one of my boys came to me yesterday. They were going through their clothes and trying to get rid of clothes that they couldn't wear anymore. And they came to me and they gave me this T-shirt and they said, "Dad, what is Find Your Bath?" I looked at the T-shirt and I went, I don't know. What is Find Your Bath? Okay. And it confused me for a little bit. And I looked at it, and I was like, find your bath. Is this some kind of idiom that I don't know about? Because, my English is not that great, despite what people may think. Those of you who know English knows it's not very good, okay? But what's find your bath? And I thought, well, maybe it's some kind of like a new slang saying or, urban saying or something like that. And it was like, I don't know what find your bath means. Then I got to looking at it, and I saw this little guy. You see that little guy down there at the bottom? He's a little bear. He's got a backpack on. Then I realized, hey, there's mountains there. And I thought, hey, mountains, find your bath. A guy with a backpack, and there's mountains. Oh, find your path. That's what it's supposed to say. So if you look at it, that P is, it looks like a B, but it's actually a P. It's just bottom of it's hidden by the mountain. So it's find your path. And I told them, I said, hey, I'm really glad you showed this to me. And they're like, why? And I told the whole family, I was like, I'm really glad you showed this. I'm like, why? And I was like, well, because this actually helps me. It's a good way to introduce a sermon tomorrow. Because when we go through life, and we journey through life, and we journey on different paths, sometimes it's very hard for us to know which is the right path and to find that path. Sometimes we think we're going on the right path, and we realize this path is not getting us anywhere. I used to hike a lot when I was in college, and I lived in southern New Mexico in the U.S., in the desert mountain areas, and I like to go hiking. And where I lived, I rented a room basically from a friend of mine that had already graduated. He'd built a house. I lived there with him. We were actually right on the edge of the mountains, and kind of actually away from town, about 10 miles out of town, right on the edge of mountains, where we'd hear mountain lions every once in a while. We'd see coyotes all the time and all kinds of other wildlife. And it's a great place to be. But it's also a great place to be because I could just go out the front door, go hiking. And I would walk up trails, and I would walk up valleys, and I'd walk up places. And sometimes I'd walk up a canyon, and maybe I'd be walking up a canyon for an hour, and I get to the end of that canyon and realize, well, I'm not going any further. Because that path had ended, and it got me literally nowhere. There were other times where I would take a path, and I'd end up on a high peak, and I could just sit there and look over the valley. And there was a place I used to like to go where you could sit there and you can look and you could see over 100 miles away to another mesa that was far away. And when it was a clear day, it was just beautiful. Deserts are beautiful when it's like that. But we search for those paths. How do we know what the right path is, we're on? Maybe we see signs. Maybe we think we're on the right path, but we realize, hey, I've misinterpreted these signs. I've misread these signs. So we're searching usually for the right path, and all of us search for that path. So questions that I asked myself, I said, well, what do we do when we find we're on the wrong path? Where do we go? How do we get back on the right path? Or better yet, if I'm on the right path, how do I make sure I keep on that path? And I thought, this idea and this thought fits this message so well. Yes, I said it's a change of heart, and I'm going to explain that toward the end. But yet, being on the right path and staying on that right path is so important. And I believe there's some principles in Proverbs, and the whole of Proverbs, that answers that question. How can I keep on the right path? Or how can I find the right path? But in chapter 4, I think there's an idea here that's foundational to that. An idea that's really, really important. So let's dive into chapter 4. Let's see what we can find. All right? So, I forgot I put this up there. Find your bath or find your path, okay? Which one is it? All right. So chapter 4, verse 1 says this, "My children, listen when your father corrects you. Pay attention and learn good judgment, for I am giving you good guidance. Don't turn away from my instructions." Okay? So here's the thing about it is, wisdom is a process. And before I do that, I brought some little clips so I could clip this here, because I was just trying to be fun today. Okay? Anyway. Wisdom is a process. It's a process of understanding, of hearing, of knowing, of searching what's right and to what's wrong. But wisdom and running the right path is also application of what we've learned and not forgetting what we have learned. So I mentioned about hiking into the desert. If I hike into the desert and I go into a place and I go up a little canyon and all, and I find it's a box canyon, and I find it goes nowhere, and I'm stuck there. Well, not stuck, because I can always go back the other way. Next time I go, am I going to go to that same place? Well, if I really liked it, I may, okay? And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we go to the same place because we think we enjoy being there. But most of the time I would not. I would remember that, and next time I would take a different route and explore a different place. So when it says, listen, pay attention, learn, don't turn away from my instructions, he's saying, hey, take these things, put them into your life, Remember them. Use them. Don't just say, oh, that's good. That's a good idea. That's a good thought. And then forget about it. But put them deeply into your life. Now, through the next about 19 verses or so, he gives a lot of different things. And we're not going to go through those because we'd be here 3 hours. But I want to just highlight them to you really quickly, okay? Wisdom will do this. It will protect you in verse 6. It will exalt you in verse 8. It'll embellish you in verse 9. It'll prolong your life in verse 10. It'll guide you in verse 11. It'll remove obstacles in verse 12. And in verse 13, it will give you life. Okay? Now, those are things that I would like to have in my life. Solomon says, wisdom will do this. So he says to us, listen to me. I'm going to give you some things. I'm going to give you some things that are wise in your life. And if you apply them to your life, all these things will happen. Okay? They will happen. And we could talk about how wisdom protects us. We could talk about how wisdom guides us. We could talk about how wisdom does all these things. But I want to get to what I think is the key to this chapter. And it's one of those keys to all of Proverbs. Look at verse 20. Again, he kind of repeats what he says in verse 1. My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. Okay? Pretty simple, right? Listen carefully to my words. Pay attention to what I say. One of my commentaries, actually, let me read verse 21 before I do that. Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep within your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. So this is why you need to listen, because these things will happen to you. I like what one of my commentaries says. It says this: commit yourself to listen and to read wisdom so that it will shape your heart. Okay? Go back to that verse. What's it say? Let them penetrate deep into your heart. I can read, and I use this illustration because this is something I've done a lot over the last few years. I could read a lot about health. I could read a lot about losing weight. I could read a lot about, my heart health, what I need to do to make my heart healthier, what I need to do to make my lung capacity bigger, what do I need to do because, I'm over 50 years old now. How does life change? I could read about all those things I wanted to. I could know that, hey, there are tests. Nancy showed me this week that for someone my age that you can go to a clinic and you can have a blood test and you can get checked for 6, 7 different types of cancer or something like that. I can know all that. Okay? I can know that I need at my age to have some of those procedures and things done that I don't want to do. But it does me no good unless I go and do it. It does me no good unless I let that penetrate into my heart and change my thoughts on things. Okay? Yes, I hate to go to the doctor. Yes, I hate some of these things. But until I say into my heart, I need to do this, I won't be willing to go do it. It's the same thing with everything else in life. You have to let these teachings penetrate deep down into your heart. You have to commit yourself, as it said, to listen and to read wisdom so that it will shape your heart. Because if your heart is shaped one way, your life will live that way as well. Okay? Look at the next verse. Oh, well, I said that verse again. Okay, let me go on to the next verse. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. This, to me, is one of those key verses. Guard your heart above all else, because it determines the course of your life. Now, think about it. Think about what this verse is saying. I've shared this with you before, but when I was in my late teens, early 20s, when I was going to school, I also worked in the oil fields. Okay, and I worked just as a contractor. I worked on the summer breaks, my Christmas breaks, any time I could work because it was good money, and they needed help. And they needed help because the regular workers would go on vacation and stuff. So I was just hired to kind of fill in and hired to do special projects and stuff like that. So it was good for me and it was good for the company I worked for. But in that type of business, there are things that happen that just normal. But some of you know this in your line of work too. But there are tools that you would use that I didn't know what the actual name of the tool was. I just knew what its curse word name was. Okay? This blankety blank blank blank. Get the blankety blank 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 and hit the blankety blank blank with the blankety blank blank. Okay? That's how it was all the time. And you're around that all the time. Well, I went home one summer. I spent, about 3 months or 2.5, 3 months working in the oil fields. And one of the things I loved about working on it was not only was good pay, but they let me work 6 days a week. And so I got a lot of overtime pay. I could work 7 days a week, but I didn't want to. They let me work six days of work. I got lots of overtime pay, so I would make lots of money in a short period of time. And since I was working so hard, I couldn't spend that money, so I was saving money for the next year of school. So I went home one summer. I did that. I came back to school where I was in school in New Mexico State, down in southern New Mexico. I was also very involved in my church there, and I was helping out with a youth group. And that one summer when I came back, I was back about a month, and the youth pastor, and called him the youth pastor, and he came in and met with me all the time, and we'd have breakfast together about once a week and talk about different things because I was an intern in the church as well. And he came in one breakfast. He says, Bill said, hey, I got to talk to you about something. I said, what's that? And he said, well, some of the parents have said that some of their kids are coming home and saying that you're using curse words. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, what do you mean? So he shared with me some of the things that they said I said. Okay? Now, in the church, those words weren't considered very good words to say, especially from a youth leader working with junior high kids. And I was working with junior high kids at that point. And what I come to realize is that throughout that summer, I'd heard those words so much, it just became part of my vocabulary. I didn't know I was saying them. I didn't know I was putting, some of those words in there. It just didn't occur to me because I hadn't guarded my heart. Now, I could guard my heart in a couple ways. I could have not worked that job, but the money was good. I needed the money. I could guard my heart in other ways too, being aware where I'm going, what I'm doing, and setting up defenses against that. And one of the things that I noticed after that if I went and watched a movie and if the movie had a lot of language in it, then that next week, that language would come out in me. And so I started thinking about how can I protect myself from going into these directions? And that seems like a very easy, very silly type of thing. But we're all faced with that at all times. You cannot avoid some of it, but you still can guard your heart. And he gives us some things. He gives us some things about how we can guard our heart, okay? But before we go there, let's go to Mark. And this is Jesus speaking. Mark says this, or Jesus said this. He said, and he added, it is what comes from the inside that defiles you. And let me get to my notes here. I don't know where my notes are. But when we come to this verse and we look at this verse, look at the next part of it. From within a person's heart, from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. Now, Jesus was addressing the people, and he was addressing the Pharisees. And remember, the Pharisees in particular were very good about outside appearance. Okay? They were very good about showing everybody else how good they were, how sinless they were. And Jesus says, hey, applaud, yay, good, I'm glad. But what's more important? What's inside? Remember some of the things that he said, okay? You've read, commandments say, do not murder. But I tell you what, even if you think that, you have done it. Okay? And what was he getting at? What he was getting at is, yes, outside appearances are not bad, controlling ourselves in that way, but what is the issue? The issue is what's at the heart. Last Monday, I did some counseling. I met with a counselor. And I shared with the counselor about a week ago about how I got really mad about something, and I shouldn't have gotten mad about it, and I don't know why I got so angry so fast and everything else. And she said, why? What made you angry? Not the circumstance at the time, but what was behind that anger. And I had to share with her, and I had to share and talk about what I thought it was. And I got to thinking about it, and I listed some things that were happening, some things that were going on, some things that maybe caused more stress in my life, things that caused anger in my life, that maybe the anger wasn't there, but it was within my heart. And this event just triggered that to bust open in a big way. And since then, I have thought about it, and there'll be other times this week where the same situation types happen. Yes, I've been angry at times, but I've been better prepared because I'm guarding my heart, because I know what's there, and I know that could help burst out into anger, burst out into things. So I've been telling myself, hey, it's okay for me to feel this way, because God, you're going to help me. God, you're going to do what you need to help me to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better person altogether. Because out of our heart, that's where sin comes. Okay? That's where sin comes from. What it is we want. Are we greedy? Wanting what everybody else has? Then that leads us to maybe stealing, maybe cheating, maybe putting somebody down because they have more than I have. All those different types of things. Verse 23, all these vile things come from within. They are what defile you, is what he says in Mark there. So going back to another set of verses, Deuteronomy says this, and we're going to read Deuteronomy 4 later, but Deuteronomy 3, chapter 30 says this, the Lord your God will change your heart and the hearts of all your descendants, so that you will love him with all your heart and soul, and so that you may live. And here is the good news, and here's the good news of what Christ does, because Christ is wisdom himself. Jesus is wisdom himself. Jesus knows everything and is everything. And if we turn our hearts to him, if we turn our lives over to him, he says, hey, I will take you right where you are. I will work with you. I will change you. And that's one of the hopes that I have for this week. I'm like, God, okay, I realize this in my life. Then work with me, change me, help me to be a better person. Help me to be the person I want to be in my life. Okay? So he will change your heart if you trust him to do that. So, how do you guard your heart? Well, let's look at the next few verses really quickly. Don't think I need to talk much about this. I think it's pretty simple. Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Hey, your heart, if you have a problem with that type of talk, what do? You train yourself, okay? You protect yourself in that type of way, okay? You avoid it. You stay away from corrupt speech. Verse 25, look straight ahead, okay? Fix your eyes on what lies before you. So you look straight ahead, you look at the goal of where you're going, and you don't let things distract you from that goal. There are so many things in this world that distract us all the time. And actually, I was reading an article about this because in some of the search, and the article was kind of anti-smartphone type of thing, because they were like, this distracts us more than anything. I think I can say this. He may be watching because he watches sometimes, but my brother, for a long time, didn't have a Facebook account. And I asked him one time, 10 years ago, why don't you have a Facebook account? And he says, well, because Facebook is evil. Okay? And by the way, I agree with him. But he's like, and I'm like, well, why is that? And he's like, well, because people get on there and he says he just never seen much good out of it. Then, not too long ago, a couple years ago, he got a Facebook account. And so I was teasing him, well, how come you got a Facebook account? I thought you said you never had one. And it's like, well, my daughter told me if I wanted to see pictures of my grandkids, I had to get a Facebook account. Okay? So that went on for a while, and then he didn't have a Facebook account anymore. And I said, well, how come you don't have a Facebook? And he said, oh, that thing's evil. Okay? And it wasn't because of his granddaughter's pictures or his daughter's picture. It was just because of everything else that came on there. And he's just like, I don't need that in my life. I don't need to hear how bad, the government is, or hear how bad this person is or that person is. I don't need to hear, everybody's dirty laundry and things. Because a lot of people put stuff on there that sometimes I shake my head and go, really? You put that on Facebook? Okay. He's like, we don't need that. So he's saying, hey, it distracts me from where I need to go and what I need to do. I think it's fun, too, when we look at corporate people and we look at executives. And in the last couple of years, there's been some articles came out, and it kind of first started with the Facebook guy, Mark Zuckerberg, about how he wears the exact same clothes every day. Now, that doesn't mean he wears this same shirt every day, but he's got like 7 of these shirts, okay? And every day he walks in his closet, he looks in his closet, which shirt should I wear? And he doesn't have to choose which shirt and pants and all to wear because they're all the same. And he does that so that he doesn't have to be distracted in making a decision about, what clothes should I wear? It's already done. And he says he can take that mental energy then and apply it to his work. And I've read that he's not the only one that does. There's several people that do that. They have simple things in their life that they have simplified so much they don't even have to make a decision because they don't want to be distracted. So we look straight ahead. We fix our eyes on what lies before you and what's in front of you. But it's not just looking far in the distance. I could sit here and I could look at the back row and kind of overlook all of you, but I would never see you. But he says in the next verse, look at this. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. In other words, this is saying, hey, don't look over there and overlook everything right in front of you. Okay? You're hiking along a trail. What are you always doing? You're looking ahead. You're looking backwards even too. That was one of the things I was always taught. When you walk in, you look backwards to see where you came from so you know where to go on the way back, right? But you're always looking at, in the desert, you're looking for rattlesnakes. You're looking for rocks. You're looking for cactus, okay? You're looking for things that could be a stumbling block in front of you in that path. And this is what he's saying too. Mark out a straight path. Look and see where you're going. You see an obstacle in the future, hey, how are you going to steer around that obstacle? Sometimes maybe you just need to plow through it. Well, if you're going to plow through it and you're going to keep your path straight, how are you going to do that? He said, hey, beware, be attention. And so in like this verse where we look straight ahead and we don't let things distract you, same thing here. Don't let those things that can make you stumble, don't let those things that could get you off the path distract you. Get you off the path. Set a straight path. Stay on the safe path. Verse 27, don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil. So, he says those things. He says, hey, this is what we ought to do. We ought to guard our heart in these type of ways. And I said we need to have a change of heart. Yes, God in Deuteronomy, Moses told us that God will change our heart. Because sometimes our heart is so broken. Sometimes we've had experiences in our life that we say, hey, maybe this happened in my life. How can I possibly trust God? And so our heart is broken. That little video, and I should have put it up here, that I showed you at the beginning, that the first heart, remember the first heart had a big chunk out of it? Maybe part of your heart is missing because of what happened. Maybe someone has shot an arrow or has cut your heart, caused damage to it. And maybe you're kind of over that because there's a Band-Aid there. But there's still that hurt. There's still those scars. And God is saying, hey, I can change your heart. I can make you whole again. I can give you a new heart, a new outward look toward life, a new path to follow. And he says, I'm going to give that to you. I want you to guard your heart. Let's read a little bit out of Deuteronomy chapter 4. And we're going to read Deuteronomy chapter 4. When I'm done reading, we're going to have a little bit of time. Howard's going to come and play the piano softly for us. And I'm going to give you a few things to think about and a few things to consider in your life. And then we'll read this verses again a little bit later. But for now, let's just read it and look at it and see it. Chapter 4, verse 1, and then we're going to read verses 5 through 9. It says, Now Israel, listen carefully to these decrees and regulations that I'm about to teach you. Obey them so that you may live, so that you may enter and occupy the land of the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Verse 5, Look, I now teach you these decrees and regulations, just as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may obey them in the land that you are about to enter and to occupy. Obey them completely, and you will display your wisdom and intelligence among the surrounding nations. When they will hear all these decrees, they will exclaim, How wise and how prudent are the people of this great nation. For what great nation has a God near them, as the Lord our God is near to us whenever we call to him? And what great nation has decrees and regulations as righteous and fair as this body of instructions that I am giving you today? But watch out. Be careful never to forget what you have seen. Do not let these memories escape your mind as long as you live. Be sure to pass them on to your children and to your grandchildren. He said, hey, guard your hearts. Let these things penetrate into you so that they will direct your lives. These are simply the words of Moses. Moses in Deuteronomy, as many of you know, his charge to the Israelite people as he's reaching the end of his leadership of them. And he gave them a task. He tells them the laws of God. He outlines them. He says, hey, you're about to approach a new land, a promised land that God has given to you. And he said, hey, no, here's the thing. God isn't expecting a mechanical obedience. He's not expecting you just to show it on the outside. God wants a change in heart. He urges diligence and obedience, no doubt about it. It's a diligence that will lead to wisdom and discernment, things that can give us life. It's a sense of God being near. So here's what I want you to do as Howard plays. I want you to think about those four things, okay? Diligence, wisdom, discernment, and God being near. And I want you just to ask yourself questions. Am I diligent in my faith? Am I using wisdom, discernment in my life? Is God near to me, or is God far away? And no matter where you're at in life, God will hear you today if you talk to him. Even if you want to say to him, God, I've just been having such a bad time lately. It's hard for me to want to be near you. Tell God that. Let God speak to you in this next minute or two as Howard plays, as you listen to him, and as you talk to him. A couple more questions for you to think about, pray about. What's your response to obeying God? Personal level. What about on a corporate level or a global? And he says, put wisdom deep within your life. Let it penetrate. Are you willing to respond to God? Say, okay. Howard continues to play. We're going to read this passage again. And as we read this passage again, try and reflect who the character of God is. Reflect on your image of God. No matter what that is, don't be afraid to talk to God about it. So let's read the passage again as Howard plays.
And now, Israel, listen carefully to this decrees and regulation that I am about to teach you. Obey them so that you may live, so you may enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestor, is giving you.
Look, I now teach you these decrees and regulation just as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may obey them in the land you are about to enter and occupy.
Obey them completely, and you will display your wisdom and intelligence among the surrounding nation. When they hear all these decrees, they will exclaim, "How wise and prudent are the people of this great nation!"
For what great nation has a good as near to them as the Lord our God is near to us whenever we call on him?
And what great nation has decrees and regulation as righteous and fair as this body of instruction that I'm giving you today?
But watch out, be careful, never to forget what you yourself have seen. Do not let this memory escape from your mind as long as you live, and be sure to pass them on to your children and grandchildren.
Wisdom for life. Wisdom to change our hearts. Wisdom to have forgiveness, love. If we would follow God's commands, we would follow his wisdom in our lives, this world would be a completely different place. It wouldn't be racism. It wouldn't be neglect. We wouldn't go around saying it's so unfair. But we would relish, cherish each other, put our relationships ahead of all else. Because that's what God did for us. Jesus came not to put us in our place, but he came to give us a place. because God loves you that much. He loves me that much. He said, hey, I want you in my family. I want you to know my power, my wisdom, my knowledge. I want you, as John said, to have a full and abundant life. What's he ask of us? He says, trust in me. Doesn't say you have to understand it all. None of us do. But he says, take a step and trust in me. That's the message of the gospel. The message of the gospel is a change of heart. Trusting God in who he is. As we close the prayer times, do this. Ask God for a glimpse into aspects of God's character you've never seen. Ask God to widen your vision. Ask God to help you to guard your heart. Go to God in prayer. Father, we thank you that we can have a good life. Father, we thank you that wisdom is there to protect us, to guide us, show us the way. That wisdom can help us in every aspect of our life, in particular in our relationships with each other. So, Father, help us to take wisdom and put it deeply into our lives so that it's not just something we have head knowledge about, but it's something that we have heart knowledge about, so that it just pours out of our life in everything we do. In Christ's name we pray. I'm going to leave you with just this thought. And the thought is this: what do my struggles reveal about my heart? Talk to God and ask God, can you change my heart, change me at the heart level? Ask him, can you? And then ask yourself, are you willing to let him change you? It's a scary thing. He can do it, and he will. It's not a behavior modification. That's not the message of Christianity. The message of Christianity is our lives, relationship with God. Our worship team is going to come back and we're going to sing another song. So why don't you guys go ahead and stand up. Let's sing a song, Yes, as we close out our service today.
It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and he will give you the desire of your heart. Let's sing, Yes.
Ask, it shall be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will open, and that's a promise. He said he'll finish the work he started in you. Your needs he will supply. He'll never leave you nor forsake you, and that's a promise. It's a guarantee, it's a beautiful thing. He delights to keep his word. God says yes to his promises. Take him at his word. Yeah, you can believe it. God says yes to a childlike faith. When we claim everything he died to give, God says yes. God says yes. He said, come, all you weary ones,
and He will give you rest. His strength is perfect in our weakness, and that's a promise. It's a guarantee, it's a beautiful thing. He delights to keep His word. God says yes to His promises. Take Him at His word. Yeah, you can believe it. God says yes to a childlike faith. When we claim everything He died to give, God says yes to His promises. Take Him at His word. Yeah, you can believe it. God says yes to a childlike faith. When we claim everything He died to give, God says yes. God says yes. God says yes.
Our closing verse is Psalms 19:14 today. And I thought this was a great verse to close out our worship today. And this, let me say this to you as a blessing. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart, actually, everybody say it together because this is about us, okay? Let's do it again. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Go guard your heart. Meditate on the things of God. Seek Him out, and He will find you. Go with God. Have a great day today and a great week this week. God bless you.